Comic Book Chronicles, ladies and gentlemen. And our guest today is the New York Times best-selling author of more than 16 novels and graphic novels, including a few for DC Comics. Last year saw the release of his book, Young Alfred, Pain in the Butler, which is very easy to say with a straight face. He also wrote what I unabashedly think is one of the best Justice League stories to come down the road in many years with Dear Justice League, as well as its sequel, Dear DC Supervillains. I'm thrilled he's here. Michael Northrop, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So, you know what? Like I said, you've written a whole bunch of books, a whole bunch of graphic novels, and as a writer myself, I'm always curious about how writers make the transition into becoming professional writers. So, at the risk of starting with a stock question, how did you become a professional writer, sir? Can you give us I don't know if I want to say
Yeah.
abbreviated version, but how'd you do it?
Well, I cheated a little bit. I was already an editor, and I did a lot of writing as part of that job. I worked at Sports Illustrated for Kids magazine,
Right, for like
for,
12 years, right?
for like 12 years, yeah. And so I did pretty much everything, while I was there, from, I started out writing for the website, which was brand new, by the way, at that time, like CompuServe,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, we had an exclusive page on CompuServe and then a web page. And so, yeah, I was sort of in on the ground floor, writing for the website, ended up editing the website. Then I moved over to the magazine. I was the baseball editor. So yeah, I did a lot of different things, there, but a lot of it, even when I was editor, was still writing. And of course, writing for kids, writing specifically for a very, very focused age group, and a lot of short articles about, athletes' superstitions and things like that, and, season previews and that kind of stuff. And while I was doing that, I was writing a lot of short articles, and I decided to start writing, sort of for myself on the weekend. So I started writing short stories, and the short stories got longer, and I wrote like a novella, and then I finally, was ready to write novels. So I was doing that kind of on the weekends as I was at SI Kids, and then, things got worse in magazine publishing, at
Yeah.
Time Inc. in specifically after the AOL merger and all this stuff. And it got to be a point where it was a difficult situation. And I had survived a number of rounds of layoffs already, but the
Hmm.
staff, and at one point, the edit staff on SI Kids was like 26, and it was down to like 10 maybe. And then I left, and I don't think they replaced me. And now, I think it's just maybe a couple people, um, but if, at its height, it was fantastic. We had a big staff, we had a big budget. And we put out a fantastic magazine, but it got harder and harder, a more challenging environment, and my writing was going better and better. So I just decided to make that leap, and I basically left before they could lay me off, and made a go of it as writing young adult novels initially. And I had a couple of
I was
very
gonna say, so you
lean years,
basically had
and
to.
then my second book, Trapped, did very well. And then it was like I planned it, like, and yeah, and
So you
that's,
basically you had to bet on yourself,
yeah, I
essentially.
did bet on myself. I mean, the first book came out with a small advance and not enough to live on. I thought, oh, maybe I'll do some freelancing and stuff, which turned out to be, not a great fit for me. I don't like pitching that much. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, like I had a couple lean years, and then the second book came out and did well. And then it got easier going forward. But yeah, I mean, the magazine was a fantastic preparation for writing. And I just made not so much the leap as kind of more of a short hop, to writing for a corporation, to writing for myself.
Awesome. And so now we're fast forwarding a little bit, but
Yeah.
you make the bet on yourself. So how does that transition into you hooking up with DC and Dear Justice League coming along?
Well, once again, I cheated there a little bit because, like, I cleverly broke into DC by selling like a million novels, right? So like I they when they were starting their young readers line, they were looking for people with experience telling stories for that age group, right? And so I at that point, yeah, had already sold like a million young adult and middle grade novels for Scholastic, um, and including like a 5 books adventure series called Tomb Quest, which had sort of magical
Right.
elements and stuff. And the first book was a New York Times bestseller and stuff. And so they were looking for people who'd had success telling stories, these kind of stories for that age group. And
Yeah,
I
for that
think actually
audience.
they didn't approach me directly. They approached my agent, who's fantastic, Sarah Crow, who has like kind of a comic book name. It's like Crow with an E on the end, Sarah Crow.
Oh,
And
really?
so she knew I was a big comic book fan, as a big comic book reader. And so she's like, oh, I might have a writer for you. And so that's how that happened. Basically, I was just kind of doing my thing, writing novels for kids, and they were looking for storytellers, and that's how that happened. So that was just a good timing, I think.
So you grew up a comic book reader? You're a geek like the rest of us?
Yeah, yeah. I grew up a comic book reader, and obviously, you know, um, this was back in the magazine rack days in my
Oh,
local
yeah.
pharmacy. And I'm from a very small town in northwestern Connecticut, Salisbury, Connecticut. So we didn't have any place that sold comic books, but in Lakeville, which is like sort of the little town next door, where we could bike to, there was a pharmacy, and it had the main ones on the magazine rack at the pharmacy, so like Spider-Man and X-Men and stuff like that. And the nearest comic book shop was in Torrington, Connecticut, which is it's what they call like a micropolis, right? So it's not like
Mhm.
a metropolitan area, it's like a micropolitan area where it's like the largest city is like under 40,000 people or whatever, but it's a city to
Yeah.
us. Like it had a movie theater, and it
Yeah.
had a comic book shop, and the comic book shop was called My Mother Threw Mine Away, which is a
Oh,
great
geez.
name. And
Yeah, no doubt.
yeah, so we would make like the pilgrimage there like once a month, or my brother and I have an older brother, 2 years older, and we would like as often as we could like badger our mom into taking us basically to Torrington. We would go to the comic book shop, and so that's sometimes that's once a month, sometimes that's a little bit more, a little bit less, but that
As
was always
often
a
as you can
really
go.
big deal for us. And the other thing that was happening right at the same time was that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was being put out in that little town on the other side in Sharon, Connecticut. This was when they
Really?
were, yeah, Mirage was in basically operating out of like a garage in Sharon, and Salisbury, Sharon, Kent, Cornwall. These are all like little towns in the corner,
Yeah.
and it's like regional school district number one, Canaan also. Um, and uh, so it was like for my regional high school, just to give you an idea, it was 6 towns, and it was like 400 people total, like out of
Oh,
those six
wow.
towns. And
Wow.
so these are pretty small towns. But in one of them, yeah, like this cool thing was happening with these, and this was still black and white, this first black and white
Yeah,
Teenage
the
Mutant.
black and white
And
comic.
yeah, and I had a poster on my wall, like a black and white poster, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I had those original comics,
Oh,
like,
man.
and of course, the irony is my mom, who for years was badgered to take us to this comic book shop called My Mother Threw Mine Away. As soon as I
Oh,
went to
no.
college, she threw them all away. They were all in a Foot
Oh,
Locker,
man.
and including those early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all of that, some very early um, X-Men finds from flea markets and stuff. And
Wow.
it was just that was, but yeah, so I grew up a big uh um comic book fan. Mostly the comics then were Marvel, because that's what I was available, and that's what
Yeah,
everyone else was reading, to the extent that when I say everyone else, the other 5 geeks in the class basically.
there you go.
But yeah, so I'd encounter DC like and Super Friends and stuff, and Superman movie, and like Batman TV show. So like DC was on the screen, and Marvel was in the comic books for
Oh,
me. And
the
then some other
page.
indie comics like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but also like the Badger and stuff like that, that was like around at the
Okay.
time that, we were really into. So yeah, I mean, it was good. I mean, it was fun because we were into comic books, and they were hard to come by, and that made them
Yeah,
really special. Like when you got your hands on something cool. And so,
I
like
believe it.
we'd vacation in Cape Cod in the summer because we had an aunt who rented a place, and it's basically her whole like extended hillbilly family just piled in every summer. Um, and there's a flea market, a big flea market
Yeah.
in Wellfleet there. And there, a lot, one of the things you'd get, probably still, but definitely back at the time, was a lot of people with long boxes, even back then. And
Oh
so
yeah.
it was just pour through the, in our like
Nice.
Ghostbusters t-shirts, we would pouring through the long boxes and found some cool stuff. And
I
yeah,
believe it.
it was a fun time. Yeah.
So then DC comes to essentially you
Yeah.
through your agent.
Mhm.
So now do they have this idea for you? The letter writing idea, or I guess the email writing idea in the modern terms. Do you have this idea for them, or does somebody pitch it to you? How does the idea come about?
Yeah, that was my idea, and that came about from my previous job at Sports Illustrated Kids. So, I mean, it was interesting because we were a big publication. We had a pretty sizable. I don't know what the circulation was. I mean, the print run I think maybe was maybe around a million or something, but the readership was much higher because you had, families with multiple kids and school
Yeah.
libraries and stuff. So I think our readership was like 6 or 8 million or something. So we would definitely, and we'd go to all the like Super Bowl, we go to the Olympics, we go to, the World Series. Like I went to spring training every year. It was really cool. But so we would interview big name athletes, like
Yeah.
Michael Jordan. There's a while where Michael Jordan would talk to SI kids, but he wouldn't talk to SI because they put him in the
Really?
cover, like fumbling that catch with the White Sox when he was like trying to be a baseball player. And
Oh,
he really held a grudge for a while. He wouldn't say, we wouldn't talk to Sports Illustrated. So they'd like slip us questions to like try and ask him. Um,
wow.
but yeah, so we would talk to, whoever, like the, Derek Jeter or whoever, like big name stars. And it's interesting to talk to these athletes because they mostly don't answer your questions, right? Like a lot of like taking it one game at a time and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that kind of
Stock
stuff.
answers.
Yes, no, platitudes, cliches. Right, because they get asked a lot of questions all the time. They sort of like
Hmm.
have some boilerplate answers, and that's what you're going to get. Um, but one of the things I used to do was ask questions that had been sent in by readers, right? And
Right.
these are often different questions than they're getting about like, whatever, taking the
You get offbeat
three
questions?
pointer and whatever in the third quarter with the whatever. It's not sort of game specific stuff. Is more likely like, do you have a dog? Or, like these kinds
Yeah.
of things.
Kid
Or
question.
if it is sports, it's like, very like, you know how did you start with before you were really good? Did you struggle or things like that, right?
Yeah.
And the thing I always noticed was we would get such better answers asking questions from kids, right? So if I'm asking a pitcher like, oh, about their, split finger or something like that, they'll just be like, "Ugh." But then I'm like, okay, so this 10-year-old in Michigan wants to know if you played any other sports growing up. And then it's like, and you can see like this little like, like
Yeah. It shifts.
scratch, like record scratch. And they're like,
Yeah.
you know, uh, I think I can answer this one, or like they just take a moment and think back, oh, when I was 10, and that it just changes their attitude, you know what I mean? Like, and I get some fantastic answers to these questions, and it was really noticeable. And then the next guy would come up and ask them about whatever, the back end of the bullpen or something, and they'd just be like, we'll see how it goes. You know what I mean? Like,
Go
and
right back.
I was just like, it always struck me, and I just thought that the same dynamic would work with superheroes, right? Larger
Yeah.
than life figures who can do things the rest of us can't, who a little defensive, you know, private, or guarding their private space carefully because it's precious to them for you know because, either because it's their secret identity or
Right,
because they
secret
don't have a lot
identity,
of
right?
privacy and the cameras are following them around. But, I just thought the same dynamic that worked with pro athletes would work with superheroes. The
Is
defenses
it
come down and yeah.
is it difficult for you? I mean, in terms of coming up with these questions for these superheroes, I mean, is it difficult? And I mean, I guess obviously you wrote for that audience for many years and edited for that audience, but was it difficult in that new context to sort of put yourself
No,
in
no, no. It
the
was very
shoes
easy
of,
because
you know?
one of the things is I read so many letters and emails that came in from kids. Like when we'd put out a call, like, oh, do you have a question for this athlete or this athlete? And I'd get them and it'd be like a barrage. And they would definitely like break down into certain categories, you know what I mean? Like, and they were still so like to this day, they're still so familiar to me. Um,
Hmm.
like the kind of things that kids want to know about people who are essentially abstractions to them, like the big star on
Yeah.
their TV screen. And it just like, and it's just, you can see the psychology at work there. Like they want to relate to them in some cases. In some cases, they want them to be more mythical. In some cases, they want them to be more human. In some cases, they just have, it's like the kid who raises his hand and it's not even a question. It's like, my favorite color is blue or whatever. And it's just like
Yeah.
things where it's more about the kid than it is about you know. So I mean, there definitely that psychology was very familiar to me. And that was it's just the challenge there was just to make it um have some variety in the questions and have
Yeah.
questions that fit in some way the like essential character of that superhero, like this
Hmm.
the core identity of that superhero. So I wouldn't even say it was a challenge, but that was the process of putting that together. Like, what's a good, okay, that question was serious. Let's have a sillier one. Who's this going to be?
Right.
Yeah.
So what did excuse me, what did Gustavo Duarte bring to the table? What was it like for you to see, these questions that you would come up
Yeah.
with from your background then materialized into something visual? I mean, because you worked with him on two books.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Gustavo I mean, first of all, I mean, Gustavo's a genius, right? And so,
Hmm.
the thing about that was it was an interesting process of sort of getting to know each other, but it was turned out to be very easy because we have very similar um sort of touchstones, super friends and a lot of the same, you know what I mean, like
Okay.
same era of stuff. And but also just similar conceptions of these characters. And so it was really interesting when I was writing the script for Dear Justice League. I started out and the panel descriptions were very detailed. Like, okay, so we got like Superman flying. So I'm like, okay, his left knee is raised at a 45-degree angle, and like his left
Wow.
arm is punched out into the sky, but he's making a fist. It's not straight, like really specific stuff, right? And it's like his expression he could be thinking that, like really. And then after I started
He
getting,
spelled it out for him.
yeah, yeah, after I started getting pages in from Gustavo and talking to him a little bit about this stuff, I was just like, Superman flying, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
like I knew like we were on the same page, and I also knew he was bringing like a really fun like sensibility and more visual sensibility to it than I was. The other thing he would do, just as an example, is like I'd have like a 5-panel page and it would come back as 4 panels or 6 panels because he is a really experienced visual storyteller. And like that was the first graphic novel I wrote. And the process was very smooth because like as it turns out, you can't read like 10,000 comic books in your life and not like internalize that.
Yeah.
But still, like a lot of that was coming from some like unspoken place, like where I'm sitting there staring at the wall and visualizing the page. And he had done it many, many times before. So he really helped me with the visual storytelling. And every once in a while, he'd just pocket veto something. Like I'd have something in the description and it just like would either not be there on the page or it would be something different. And it was every time it was better. You know what I mean? And so, in fact,
I
I'll
believe
get
it.
people like say, "Oh, yeah, I'll be like, what's your favorite thing about, in the book or whatever?" And they'll tell me, and it's like so often it is something that was entirely Gustavo. You know what I mean? Like some expression, something in the background, some little Easter egg or whatever. And that was great. It was just like a process of like it was like you say like trust, but it's really like the partner in crime kind of trust
Yeah,
where it's just like we're just
it's a
like
partnership.
yeah, we're just going for this and it's just like yeah, you just like trust they're got to make the right decision. You're pulling in the same direction. And it was fun because it's like, he would be like, oh, we worked on two books because and we will work
Yeah.
on another one as soon as we get the chance because it's like he has fun drawing the stuff that I write is we're kind of on the same page and then he takes that maybe a joke that's like 90% there and colors in the rest and it's really yeah it was a fantastic process really
He takes the ball and runs with it.
yeah, exactly. That's it. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm the quarterback who like hands it off like 3 yards behind the line, and then it's like a 38-yard run, and I'm like, I did that.
There you go. You get the credit.
Yeah.
So I imagine in that sense that the second book was it easier to write than the first book? The second book being Dear DC Supervillains?
Yeah, it was easier. I mean, it's a different, it was interesting because we didn't want to just like do it over. You know what I mean? Like, so we
Yeah.
wanted like different feel, different, and obviously the thing about supervillains is superheroes are gonna give good advice, supervillains are gonna
Mm.
give bad advice, but they're not gonna know it, right? Like to them, it's
Yeah.
still, you know what I mean? Like, and that so that dynamic was fun. It was a little bit more dramatic irony, right? Where the reader knows
Mhm.
something that the characters don't. And that's fun for kids, because the characters
Yeah.
are adults, right? So like they're like, oh, that's terrible advice, and they know it, but the characters don't, or like they're watching character do something stupid and but think that they're being clever. And so there was a lot more, it was yeah, a lot more dramatic irony, just kind of a different feel to the thing, but the same basic concept.
Okay.
And yeah, it was easier also in the sense that yeah, I went into it completely trusting Gustavo and really collaborating on him very closely in terms of like the stories and the pages. So that was fun. It was easy. It was a little bit of a challenge just because you're walking a line where it's like you want these supervillains to be giving
Yeah.
ultimately advice that kids are going to get something out of, even though it's terrible advice.
Yeah.
And so it was a trickier coming up with the questions and things like that for that one. But yeah, the process was super, super smooth. Yeah.
And then from there you transition into well, not transition, but you go into young Alfred.
Yeah.
Now, Alfred, of course, he's not a superhero. He's not nearly as colorful or as flashy as obviously Batman, Superman, the Joker, whatever comparison you want to make. So, I mean, was it challenging for you to make, I don't want to say make him more interesting, but make him more youthful, make him more relatable to that young audience?
Well, actually writing so I broke the book basically into two storylines, right? Which is the
Right.
familiar older Alfred, present
Yeah,
day, because we knew you got to write an Alfred book. You need Batman in there. You need some star power,
to
just
some extent.
to sell
Yeah.
the book, right? So Joker and Harley and stuff like that. And so it's got two storylines with Alfred and Batman and all of that, and then the young Alfred. And
Mhm.
young Alfred, I would say, was super easy to write because it's completely open field. Like there's really nothing out there on Alfred as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, whereas there's
Right.
so many iconic takes on Alfred now. You know what I mean? Like, and you have those in your head a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, um, comic book runs, but also movie incarnations and all of that. And
Yeah.
just that people are coming in with expectations, what they expect to encounter when they see Alfred on the page. But with young Alfred, there's none of that. You know what I mean? It's like no one's seen a young Alfred before. And so that was super fun and really liberating. I mean, you're still doing the same thing where you want to stay true to like that essential core of the character that people are going
Yeah.
to relate to from different runs and different, like what stays the same between the different interpretations. But beyond that, it was really open field, and we had a ton of fun with that. The artist there, Sam Lotfi, is also fantastic visual storyteller. In fact, that's like he had like outlined so basically storyboarded some of the young reader graphic novels before that, and they were looking for an opportunity to get him to fully draw one.
Yeah.
And so and we had a very similar conception of that too, of Alfred's world, of what the aesthetic was. It's very like Hogwartsy kind of aesthetic. In fact, we put like an owl on the, like it was like we had some inside jokes there about that, in terms of this old servant school and things like that. And
Yeah.
so again, just fantastic artist, great visual storyteller, very much on the same page. And so even, but it's funny because even the modern day Alfred is a little retro. Like it's a little, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, right. Um, so, and again, that's just
He's a
where,
butler. It's a retro concept.
yeah, right, exactly. So, and so that's where it's still a little bit of a pick up the rotary phone world in that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was just the conception that Sam and I shared for Alfred. And again,
Mhm.
like you said, it kind of makes sense. That world makes a little bit more sense for a butler in a, talks and all of that. And so, or tailcoat even. So yeah, so we had a ton of fun, but it's like we had two speeds. We had retro and more retro, and that's just how we
Yeah.
saw it, and we were very comfortable in that. And yeah, but it was, yeah, the modern day Alfred was comfortable in a way because it was very familiar. Like you've seen, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, um, and I feel like most comic book readers could put dialogue in Alfred's mouth. You know what I mean? Like you sort of know how he
Yeah.
talks, you know the sort of things he's going to say. Same thing with
Almost like a
Batman, right?
family
And
member.
so,
Mm.
um, yeah, and so that was comfortable, familiar. And then the young Alfred was the opposite. It was just why it was we could just do whatever we wanted to. We're inventing a whole
You
school
had a
and stuff
bigger
like that.
sandbox to play in.
Yeah, and that really fit with that sort of youthful energy that Alfred has. He's discovering a new world. We're creating a new world. So it was a really fun book to write, but in two different ways. Like
Yeah.
one, we just got to nerd out in the very familiar Alfred world that like almost every comic book reader knows. And the other, we got to invent something new, though it was very old. So
There you go. There
yeah,
you
so
go.
that
So,
that was super fun. Yeah.
we talk about we're talking about stories that you're writing for kids, for a young
Mhm.
audience. And you in the modern era, I feel like there's so much emphasis on how can we use from a studio perspective. Obviously, these
Mhm.
characters are owned by big studios, whether you're talking about DC or Marvel or
Yeah.
the Ninja Turtles or something else. I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean, do you think that there's so much emphasis on, okay, how can we make these characters appeal to adults so maybe we can pull a little bit more money in, that we forget that
I
at
feel
their
like,
core, these are children's characters?
I mean, I do not have a problem with the different like age. I mean, I feel like, first of all, I feel like it's a lot of creator driven. So that is creator driven. Like people are writing stuff that appeals to them, and they were 10 years old when they started reading that comic, and now they're not anymore, and they are writing more adult stuff. And I feel like it's kind of a natural process. I don't have a problem with that, but it's a weird place to coexist. Like if you go to
Hmm.
like Midtown Comics on Wednesday, right, you're gonna mostly see like dudes and like overcoats and backpacks and like weirdos like me,
Yeah.
basically milling
I mean, me
around looking
too.
for and then it's like every once in a while, like a dad's gonna bring in their kid, and it's like a weird dynamic because it's all these like serious milling adults like and then like one
Yeah.
kid who's like wants to find something kid friendly. I mean, I do feel like it's like you go to a bookstore, there's a children's section, and then whatever. As Y got bigger, that section expanded, and I feel like comics is still figuring out how that coexistence can work. You know what I mean? I feel like there is
Hmm.
more interest in young reader stuff. But for me, always, Gustavo too, like we've had this talk. We were super drunk at the time, but we still meant it. Like these comics are called all ages, and we take that very literally. Like we're not writing Dear Justice League for like, okay, this is for 8-year-olds, and this other thing I'm
Okay.
writing is for, you know what I mean? Like we're writing like a a book that everyone can enjoy, right? A kid can
Something for
enjoy,
everybody.
and if the parents are reading to a very young kid, we want those parents to enjoy it, or like
Yeah.
a much older like comic book reader who was a golden age reader or whatever, to enjoy it. Like we are writing an all ages comic. We're just trying to tell a good story with some humor, great art. And to me, if you're a comic book fan, it's a little bit like a Pixar movie, right? It's like, are those kids' movies?
Yeah.
Like technically, but are the
Yeah.
parents enjoying those? Are people who are not parents or kids watching those movies? Like 1000%. Like everyone
Hmm.
watching Up, whether they're bringing 3 kids to the show or whether they're going to a matinee by themselves, like, and they can all enjoy it. And that's what we want to do with all ages comics. That said, there's something to be said for kid specific, content. Like I did a Teen Titans Go Undead, and that's very
Right.
specific. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I just feel like it's all good. Like I love Something's Killing the Children, right? I love, Batman Scooby Doo mysteries, right? Like it's there's a lot of great content out there, and that's fantastic. But I do feel like comics still has a little work to do in terms of figuring out how that coexistence is going to work out, you know?
Mm.
And I just want to help that out. And to me, the best way I can do that is to write comics that kids can enjoy, adults can enjoy, everyone can enjoy.
Something a little more all-encompassing.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So what have you got anything in the works right now that you can talk about? Anything that I know that might be a loaded question, but anything you can tell me?
No, I mean, I've got some stuff in the pipeline pitch wise in terms of
Okay.
comics. But right now I'm writing cozy mysteries, novels.
Okay.
It's just something new for me. And it started out in the pandemic. I was writing Magnum PI fan fiction,
Oh,
basically, like
wow.
it's going crazy. And I was like focused on the Higgins character, like the original Higgins, John
Yeah.
Hillerman. Um, and that has morphed into these like Figman mysteries where it's like an ex-spy who now runs a bed and breakfast, and his next door
Wow.
neighbor is like a detective. And so it has like it started out as Higgins fan fiction basically, and it's turned into these like cozy mysteries. And I'm working on the third one now. The first one my agent has out on submission. So that would be a whole different thing. It's one of the
Okay.
great things about writing right now is like you can write novels for teens, write novels for kids. You can write graphic novels. You can write mystery novels for adults. You can, you know what I mean? Like, and it's so right now I'm focused on the cozy mysteries, reading a lot of cozy mysteries, but I just got a mini series pitch, did 6 great pages, got it rejected by Mad Cave. But they were like, it's a nice rejection. And they're like, feel free to send us something else. And so immediately, of course, I have six
Yeah.
more pages for something else sitting
Naturally.
around. So I sent that in. And so I'm still, still pitching. DC, I have some stuff in there that they asked for. Um, you know, the wheels turn
Yeah,
slowly. And
exactly.
it's fine as long as you stay busy. So, I'm pitching comic book stuff, waiting to hear on some stuff. And in the meantime, I'm writing cozy mysteries set in the Berkshires.
There you go. Hey, you know what? I'd take a look. I'll tell you that much.
Right.
Right.
I'm having a ton of fun with it. And so like that's the thing, right? As long as like right, as long as I'm having fun with it, then I feel like,
There
yeah.
you go. That's half
Yeah.
the battle. Half
Yeah.
the battle. Anything else that you would like to add, Mr. Northrop?
No, no, I mean I think yeah, I mean it's just it's fun for me because comics were the first thing I read, and
Mhm.
but then you know I didn't start out writing. I was worked in a magazine and then started writing young adult novels, and then it was my publisher was Scholastic, so they just like the longer you're there, they pull you down in
Mhm.
age group. So then I started writing kids books, and then it was DC all of a sudden, and it was a real revelation to me. Like I know how to do this. Like, you know what I mean? Like I've read so
Yeah.
many comics, you know what I mean? Like like it's rolling around in there somewhere. And that has been a really fun transition. And then, but then, you know, I've done 4 of those now for DC, and some other shorter stuff. I've gotten to write for Archie Comics, which I really enjoy. Um, and so it's fun. It's like what's next, you know? But it's like comics were my first reading love, and it's been really fun to be able to, yeah, like you said, like play in that sandbox.
Excellent, excellent. Mr. Northrop, thank you so much for joining us today. I really
Yeah,
appreciate you joining me.
thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.